This isn't meat. This is protein made from bread flour that tastes just like pork. It's the most meat-like vegetarian protein I've ever had. Just look at that texture. The flavor and the mouthfeel is spot on too. I know a lot of people are trying to avoid processed pre-made vegetarian proteins, which is why I'm going to show you how to make plant-based protein like this from scratch at home. I use organic bread flour to make a dough, and then I add a little bit of red rice powder to give it a slight hue of pink. This is totally optional. And then you add enough water to create a dough. I did about 6 cups. And many chefs will use a gluten flour instead of bread flour, but I find it difficult to source organic gluten flour. Pesticides are heavily used in wheat, which can be harmful to gut health. Seitan tastes so much better from bread flour, and considering that vital wheat gluten has like a really unpleasant aftertaste, so for better health and for better flavor, try making this with organic bread flour. So you're gonna cover your dough ball in salt water overnight to help develop the gluten. The next day, you will knead the dough ball in cold water to remove the starch. Check out my other videos for more in-depth tips and tricks on how to wash the starch out of the flour. I like to save the starch water to make pancakes, crackers, pasta, and for battering up vegetables. You want to keep washing the dough until it comes out mostly clear and the dough appears all webby. This should take about 20 minutes. The seitan gets most of its flavor from simmering in a flavorful broth. And this broth is super flavorful and is just spectacular in ramen or pho. Normally, I use shiitake mushrooms for this broth, but today I'm using dried lobster mushrooms since I'm all out. Fresh mushrooms have less concentrated flavor than dried mushrooms, so use dried mushrooms for this recipe. And once your broth is made, set your device to slow cook on low or move your broth into a slow cooker if you were using a stove. So now we want to take our gluten and we want to stretch it into a long, thin rope. We shape our seitan by knotting it up. Try twisting the dough as you knot it for an extra shreddy texture. Then you place your seitan in a stock sock or wrap it in a cheesecloth. This helps it from expanding too much, and it also helps add additional texture. And now we leave the seitan in the slow cooker, and you want to flip it after a couple of hours. I like to err on the side of caution and cook the seitan overnight to ensure that it's like truly fully cooked. However, it will probably be ready in about 4 hours. It will expand and get really nice and firm once it's fully cooked. From here, shred your seitan into chunks. And then now we're gonna heat up some coconut oil and we're gonna deep fry the shredded chunks of the seitan until they're all very crispy and golden brown. You want to think of this as dehydrating the seitan in the oil. This will help make the texture of the seitan very similar to pork, and it is the secret to making vegetarian pork in many Buddhist cultures. I learned this trick from speaking to a Vietnamese chef who runs Chu Minh Tofu in Seattle. Her seitan pork inspired this whole recipe. So now you're going to strain your broth from earlier, removing all the solids. And now we're going to add the fried seitan back into the broth. We're going to let that cook for at least 10 minutes or until the seitan is nice and tender again. The process of deep frying the seitan, then rehydrating it in the broth, gives it like this really rich and succulent texture that you would only find in fatty cuts of meat. So you can enjoy the seitan now, but it's best if you put it away in the refrigerator and you let it rest for a few hours. The seitan will firm up more as it gets cold, and then the texture just gets this perfectly meaty and chewy and still tender. I like to pan fry or roast the seitan, and for any recipe that uses pork. It's incredible over ramen or over a salad. I like to use it in this sweet and sour pork recipe from the book Vegan Chinese Kitchen, and oh my god, it was so good.